Just a handful of years ago, every team's sports science analytics group was reiterating the same message to the NBA. The players need more time off, and they need more rest to continue competing at such a high level. And the league obliged. In the 2014-15 season, every team would play on average 19 back-to-back games across the season. Since then, that number has gone down about every single year in an effort to satisfy its teams and the proven science that says that rest is good. And since the 2020-21 season, the amount of players sitting out for rest has reduced significantly. It's gotta mean that there's less injuries, right? Not exactly. Injuries have only gone up, with a league-high 6,442 games lost due to injuries in 2022. If the science is saying that players need more rest to play at their best, but players have only gotten more injury prone during the load management era, why isn't resting working? The truth is, the NBA got it wrong. Joe Dumars, the NBA Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations, has admitted that as they've gotten more data over the years, resting and sitting out doesn't correlate with a lack of injuries, fatigue, or anything like that. Now stating that every player should be aiming to play all 82 games and re-establish a culture of players wanting to do so. A culture that was once very prominent in the NBA, until the league abandoned it themselves a few years ago. The NBA messed up on load management, but they have something to fix it. Load management is a term that has been added to the NBA dictionary for several years now, and the meaning of this sparkling, nice, cool word: a team's general practice of resting players to prevent future injury and extend their career. And as we've seen, the proof is not in the pudding. We are nearly 4 weeks into the NBA regular season, and there are already 46 players out with injuries. In an era where resting is more important than playing, players have been falling to injuries at a historic rate. A young Detroit Pistons team finally got a healthy Cade Cunningham back, and they were ready to take the next step, until they got hammered by injuries. The Grizzlies have no jaw, but they'll be good. They have depth. Nope, just kidding, their whole team's dead. Yay, a new big three. KD won't have to carry a team like he did with the Nets. I'm happy for him. Now it's just a big one. As an avid basketball fan, it's disappointing not being able to watch a team at full strength or miss out on greatness from some of the most skilled players of our time. I just want to watch them hoop, man. Back in the day, it felt like the best players were always playing night in and night out. Is there any truth to it? Here is the percentage of games played per year by players that made the All-NBA team from 1993 to 2003. It's just pure consistency. It was normal for superstar players to play all 82 games, without resting on the final game of the season to be fresh for the playoffs. It was normalized back then, but it hasn't been for the last decade. From 2013 to 2018, it was fairly consistent. Guys were playing in over 90% of their games. It was lower than the 90s, but it wasn't by a huge margin. In fact, 2017 was the year where all NBA players played the most games in the last 10 years. And it was just 1 percentage point higher than the lowest amount of games played during the early 2000s. Things have changed, especially the last few years, because you see how players have been consistently not playing since 2019 by almost 10% of their games? There's a reason for that. Or should I say, there's a man for that. In the 2017 playoffs, Zaza Pachulia slid under Kawhi's foot when he was going up for a jumper, and it ended pretty badly. Kawhi would go on and miss the rest of the game and the rest of the series against Golden State as he watched his team get absolutely annihilated. That slide under Kawhi's foot, that would result in the Zaza rule, allowing the refs to call a flagrant or a technical foul for a reckless closeout on jumpers. James Harden loves that rule. Kawhi would play in just 9 games the following season because he was managing his injury, but the Spurs felt as though he was healthy enough to play. Kawhi didn't, and he was shipped to Toronto the following offseason. And up in the North, Kawhi birthed the 2 greatest words in basketball: load management. The Raptors set out a plan to not play Kawhi in any back-to-back game throughout the season while he managed his injury. And the thought of the best player on your team not playing in as many games as they usually would is a nightmare situation. In most cases. Without Kawhi, how are the Raptors going to build that team chemistry and get a good seed for the playoffs? This is not good for Toronto. Went 17-5 in games without Kawhi, and in back-to-backs where he didn't play, the Raps went 5-1 and finished the season with 58 wins, just one short of the most in franchise history. It was perfect. In the playoffs, Kawhi would put on one of the greatest postseason runs in league history. Toronto walked away with a championship, Pat McCaw three-peated, and Kawhi walked right out the door and headed to Los Angeles. We had never seen anything like this in NBA history. A team that plays their best player only when he wants to play, and they got rewarded with a banner. Is it a proven strategy, or was it just a perfect situation? because I don't think that it's a coincidence that the major decline in games played by the league's best players happened at the exact same time that Kawhi and the Raptors succeeded with load management. And in an attempt to recreate the same magic, teams have been resting their best players for years now, in hopes of finding the perfect balance between maximum rest headed into the playoffs and rust. In 2021, LeBron suffered an ankle injury, and in hopes of fully recovering and being healthy for the playoffs, the Lakers allowed him to load manage just about the rest of the season. And the result from playing it safe with your best player? A first-round exit. Near the end of that same season, Brooklyn's James Harden suffered a hamstring injury, and to play it safe, the Nets held him out for 21 of 24 remaining regular season games to make sure he was fresh for the postseason, just to re-aggravate that same hamstring in the second round against the Bucks, and then played like a complete shell of himself for half of the next season before being traded to Philadelphia. See, load management doesn't guarantee anything. The reality is that there are no benchmarks, no numbers, no metrics, nothing that can tell you if your players are really at a higher risk of injury if they play or if they sit on the bench. Resting your superstar player only guarantees one thing: disappointment. How many times have we seen teams rest their entire starting five on a back-to-back or near the end of the regular season? In March of 2022, the Warriors were in Denver for the final game of their 4-game road trip, and with a playoff spot already secured, the Dubs decided to rest Draymond, Clay, Wiggins, and the guy that people pay to watch, Steph Curry. And it left a young Warriors fan in tears as she realized her favorite player wasn't even in the building for the game. People pay big money to watch superstars play, and when they don't, it's infuriating. Luckily, Golden State heard of the situation and hooked her up with some tickets for the next game. But that's the dark side of load management. The product that the NBA offers isn't guaranteed to show. We understand the reasoning for it, but in the end, it's bad business. Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant made it a point in their career to play in as many games as possible despite small nagging injuries or fatigue. They felt as though it would be a disservice to the fans to not give it their all for every single game and give them their money's worth. A younger star like Anthony Edwards has echoed the same message. If you can play, play. And the NBA has something planned just for that. 2 months ago, the NBA released a new player participation policy starting this season. Among this small 6-page document are guidelines that, in the NBA's words, promote player participation in the NBA's full 82-game season. And within those guidelines are 5 critical policies. No more than 1 star could be unavailable for a game. Stars must be available for national TV and in-season tournament games. There must be a balance between missing home games and away games, with the preference for stars to miss home games. Teams must avoid long-term shutdowns for their players, and if a healthy player is resting, he must be present at the game and visible to fans. There's a little bit to unpack here, so let's do it. With the exception to major injuries or personal reasons, no more than 1 star player can miss a game. But what makes a star player a star player? According to the NBA, it's a player who has been named to an All-Star or All-NBA team at least once in the last 3 seasons. And who are these special players, you might be asking? It's these guys. 49 players who fit the criteria of being a star player. Even though some of these guys might be a little questionable, they're a star. Teams like the Warriors or the Timberwolves are at a disadvantage since they can only rest one of their 4 stars in a single game. Bad for the team, but it's great for fans. And a team in question would be the Spurs. They don't have any stars per the NBA's criteria, but Victor Wembanyama is clearly a star, which allows San Antonio to rest him anytime they want. I really hope they don't though, that'd be kind of stupid. Now with these rules, there are some exceptions. The NBA offers end-of-season flexibility for teams to rest their best players at the end of the regular season if the team's already clinched or if the rest is pre-approved due to a player's past injuries. Alongside this exception is what I like to call the too old to play in a back-to-back rule. Star players who are 35 years or older by opening night, or players that have more than 34,000 regular season and playoff minutes combined, or over 1,000 regular season and playoff games played across their career, can earn the approval to not play on back-to-backs. If a player meets the criteria for being too old to play in a back-to-back, the team reaches out for approval from the league and that player can rest. And the guys who meet the requirements to enter this retirement home are exactly who you expect. Chris Paul, Mike Conley, maybe you don't expect Mike Conley, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and James Harden. Only 7 players in the entire league who can rest on a back-to-back without a legit injury, giving them an advantage over other teams. And the Warriors are blessed with 2 of those old guys. But does it not contradict the point of load management? Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have been injury prone throughout their careers, leading them to miss the criteria to sit out back-to-backs. The too old to play in a back-to-back rule enables older players who aren't injury prone to rest, while guys the same age who need the rest because of past injuries miss the requirements for that exact reason. It has its flaws, but I think these policies are long overdue. Rest is of course a good thing, but in these past few seasons, load management has been taken way too far. We're in an era now where playing 70 games is amazing, when back in the day it was expected. We're not telling players to go back to the way of the 90s and drive themselves into the ground playing 80 games a year, averaging 40 minutes a night, but we just want to see them play. During the summer, the NBA introduced games played requirements for all NBA teams and awards. Now combine that with the new player participation policy, and we're going to hopefully get to see the league's best players play more often. The NBA tripped on their feet and allowed load management to go too far, but with these changes, the league is going in the right direction.
I think where, Joe Dumars has been speaking to this lately, where we're now starting to really push back hard on some of the data that where the suggestion was that you could prevent injuries from it. I think that the data is very inconclusive there.